It is, I think, one of the shared ambitions of those of us who kind of brought together ideas to start these workshops was this focus on new practices and the commitment to trying to do things differently, to address challenges which maybe we didn't face or weren't at the forefront of our minds 10, 20, 50 years ago. But also to provide a space for us to learn from and listen carefully to people who've been brave enough to establish their own practices, to try to struggle to forge new paths. So it's a huge honor to introduce Rosie Martin. And if Rosie will allow me, I'm going to read her biography because it feels like the right thing to do. And then she will give a much greater description of her work than I would. Rosie is a designer and artist with a background in landscape architecture, dedicated to shaping the built environment to include more local community input and access to creative green spaces. As a co-founder of the Sandwich Club, her design philosophy draws from the academic studies in art history and landscape architecture, emphasizing design's emotional impact and its power for social change. Rosie currently works as a project coordinator at Meanwhile Space, collaborating on a range of community-focused projects. Please join me in welcoming Rosie to the presentation.
So when Ed messaged me asking me to do a presentation, you kind of just said, yeah, like, don't hold back, like, just talk about yourself for half an hour. It feels really self-indulgent, so apologies if I go on about myself. But yeah, so I thought I would just start talking about, yeah, where my like early influences come from in my practice, and then go through to like my time studying, and then yeah, what I do now, Sandwich Club and Meanwhile Space. So yeah, I'd talk about mum and dad. First of all, there they are. Yeah, so firstly, my dad's been a huge source of inspiration to me, the way I think. He studied architecture and then art history, and was also a bit of a wannabe craftsman. He would drag me and my sister, not drag, I was enjoying it, but you know, we'd go around art galleries, cathedrals, whatever. But then he made me a doll's house, which was pink, and Georgian architecture, and yeah, a bit of a sort of everything really. My mum's a lovely lady. She's a midwife, and she just has this natural ability to connect with people and put them at ease, and women at ease from all walks of life. And I find that really inspiring, and her humanity really amazing. She grew up on a farm, and has installed in her this like practicality, cooking, eating in the seasons, being outdoors, delivering babies, calves, kittens, everything. So that's my mum. So here's me, school, talk about school. I was always drawn to like creative subjects like art, music, and English. But I was diagnosed quite early in my life with dyslexia, which is, you know, linked to being very creative, which is nice. But I think I definitely had and still have this struggle through attitude with working through with that. And sometimes I find it difficult to have like a logical thought process. Things get a bit bitty. Regardless of this, I decided to study art history at uni because I just was very drawn to sort of history and politics of art and design. I really loved art, but I didn't really think I had so much to say when I was 18, which is really funny now. And I had flirted with the idea of studying architecture, but yeah, didn't think I was clever enough at maths or physics, which again is debunked me. So I went to University of York to study art history, which was amazing, of course, and that sort of academic study really opened me up to think critically and creatively about art design. And I met some amazing friends who still play a huge part of my life and career and everything. My second year university, I studied at the University of California, Berkeley, where I think it was very pivotal in shaping my politics and my ideas about space. I took a class with Professor Darcy Grimaldo Grigsby, who about the French Impressionists and politics of public space. Read a lot of like Marxist critique of artists who were showing what was happening in Paris at the time. So Degas, Clairvaux, Manet, Renoir. And yeah, I think what they were trying to show a lot of the time in their painting was exploring performance of identity and class in public space, where the workers and the petite bourgeoisie, the bourgeoisie, upper classes would perform power and resistance. So yeah, and the public space becoming this place to perform social equality really, I think, stuck with me. I went back to York for my third year, and then I studied a class in California now, which I was able to encounter artists like Ed Boucher, who he was very interested in like urban geographies like Los Angeles. We read Learning from Las Vegas by Venturi, Scott Brown, Eisenhower, Rainer Bannon's Los Angeles, the Four Ecologies, and Frederick Jameson's postmodernism of the cultural logic of late capitalism, which were like very pivotal theoretical texts thinking about cities and urban planning. I think, however, what I really got out of that particular course was a feminist critique by Emilia Jones of Bannon's and Jameson's experience of the city. They talk a lot about the reflectivity of the surfaces, and Jameson writes about his inability to locate himself in Bonaventura Hotel, which is a postmodern hotel in downtown Los Angeles. And Jones kind of says, well, you know, the cleaners found it fine, the hotel workers found it fine to navigate, so don't really understand that. Which I thought was quite funny. She talks about Chicano artist group ASCO and their very different connection to LA during the time. You know, they lived on the freeway, on the street. That's where they'd occupy. That's where they'd perform. And yeah, their reality and their relationship to space was intimate. The street was intimate to them. They would ride the bus. They didn't have cars. You know, literally the rear view mirror of Los Angeles. So after I finished at York, I went back to the States for a bit, did a bit of traveling. Full of amazing landscapes, which, you know, have stayed with me forever. I went to go see a friend exhibit in a gallery in Reno, and whilst I was there, Mylin was speaking. Mylin is a architect and artist from North America, and she designed the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington DC. Also the Women's Table at Yale University, and Wayfield at University of Michigan, which she all presented. And I found her work really inspiring because I think what she does in her design is she places the body within space, and the space is designed to make you feel things when you're there. And I guess I hadn't really thought about that, and performance, spatial design, earth art, yeah, it really provokes a reaction, an emotional reaction. So yeah, came back to the UK, didn't really know what I was going to do. I was really interested in space still and politics, but I didn't think I could face doing another academic degree. But I came across landscape architecture and the MLA course, and thought that was really exciting because it was an opportunity to put theory into practice and explore these ideas in a spatial way, in a real way actually. I think Rue might have had a similar experience with no design background, no horticulture background, nothing like geography. And it was an experience to learn, all the programs that you do with architecture and landscape architecture. Learn about concepts like scale, which, I'm still there trying to grab it. But yeah, I had to use a lot of creative thinking, which I think came through like being like neurodiverse and having dyslexia, and fill in the holes of like how to understand this new practice. I decided what I would do is I'd draw what I thought I wanted the space to look like and how I thought people might want to be in that space and what emotions they might be feeling in that space. And like through this, I started developing a like illustrative style and representing human experience through that hand-drawn quality. So couldn't talk about my time at Greenwich without talking about Harry Bix, who was my unit tutor for 2 years. Harry's an artist and a landscape architect, and he has this amazing ability to make people feel seen and heard. I think he finds beauty in humanity and in everyday scenarios and interactions and gestures. And he has a love of high and low culture, and he brings that into his work and his practice, and subverts this idea of what landscape architecture is. And I found he was one of the first teachers that I felt really understood by and understood why I was making these connections. And he helped me like embrace that, and also things like anxiety and all that thing, and bring it into my work and like be vulnerable in my work, show humanity in my work. And he taught me how to make images. So this is this project I did with him when I was doing my MLA second year, and I think we were talking a lot about the film Florida Project, which is about some young kids who live outside of Disney World in Florida, and the childlike perspective of cities. So that's where that comes from. After I finished Greenwich, I worked in a couple of architecture practices in London, which was a very big new experience. I had some big highs and some big lows. I loved being able to develop concepts from my own ideas and present them as competitions. That was amazing. But I also suffered from really bad imposter syndrome, anxiety, depression, everything that comes with it. So I would sort of kind of go back to illustrating spaces that I was designing in my head as kind of an escape. In spring 2020, when COVID hit, I moved back to my parents, which was huge privilege to be able to do, and I appreciate not everybody got to do that. Yeah, and it was good for my mental health, but I was still suffering quite badly, so I ended up leaving my job, and I felt very scarred from working in landscape as a practitioner, and I wanted to leave it behind and start something new. I wanted a fresh start to escape. So, you know, it was a funny time, 2020. I worked with some friends who in Australia who I was just making content for them for some stuff, but I couldn't really make a career out of this. So I didn't really know what to do with my life at this point. It was a very strange time. I went to my friend's dad, who's a graphic designer, and he looked through my portfolio and I explained my work, asked whether, you know, could I be a graphic designer too? And he said, you sound like you really love landscape and you really love community, and I could see that coming through your work. And that was like, I guess that was a turning point, because having someone external view your work and see what ideas come through to them, you know, it gave me a little bit of confidence again. So I went home and I wrote a mini manifesto about designing beyond disciplines, and yeah, coming up with like cool new conversations and combinations of activities that might happen in one space. I messaged a bunch of friends from New York and Greenwich and other places, so architects, landscape architects, artists, horticulturalists, people working in agriculture, community engagement, and social linguistics. I drew up a list of projects and practices which I find really inspiring. So people like Assemble and the decorators, and like these like multidisciplinary practices, I think really interesting. And also some design competitions. Yeah, and I was just like, do you want to do a competition together? And I think everyone was at a point where they were like, yeah, go on, why not? Great. So our first competition was based on a site in Kent called Lloyd's Wharf. It's a historic dock, which the company who run it, Raybell Charters, they want, the idea is to restore it to a working dockyard with sail barges, and have artist studios along the dock as well. So we came up with like a mini master plan, and it included places to work on the dock, dry docks, accommodation for people coming through, but also art and sculpture, and working with the ecology which had been like built up during that time, and to celebrate that. We didn't win, which, you know, hardly ever happens really, but as in winning. But it was an amazing experience, and yeah, like I think it was great to like get to know these people, and for us to, you know, work remotely with all these different schedules, different life commitments via Zoom during pandemic. It was hard, but it was good. Out of this, the Sandwich Club was born. I sort of asked them, do you want to do it again? And they were like, okay. Some of them. I was the only person not in a full-time job, so I kind of wanted to start investigating how does this become a practice. So I took a set of beginner business classes through the Chamber of Commerce, and yeah, started setting up Instagram and all that. As our second piece of work we did together, we for an LFA competition in Cheapside, so we based our designs on the nursery rhyme Oranges and Lemons, which, you know, it's kind of cute. I think this project was good because it started to delineate who and what the Sandwich Club are and what we do. So we've set ourselves up as an LLP. There's 4 partners: Ches, Toya, Sam, and myself. And very fortunately, we've called ourselves the Club because we have then our unofficial club members who we can draw in when they can or want to or find interest in the project. But we have now an established relationship with Dhruv Chand, who is associate architect at HFM Architects, and he runs Narrative Practice, which is an architect platform offering students across the world free mentoring sessions, and especially students of colour, through the design and architect process. Another project we worked on was for the Society for Protection of Ancient Buildings with MFA Architects. This was to design a community garden, which was a self-build project as well. And we have created a phased programme for this garden to be created. Harry, around this time, sent me through a competition from the Art Studios set, who they take on buildings which have a short life span, in that they're coming to the end of a lease, or maybe a developer has bought that space, and they're occupying that space for the time it has left. They convert them into studios, and they had just acquired Greenwich Council's old council building in Woolwich. There was a competition for a free studio space, so we applied, and we were one of the practices that won, which is nice. And it felt really good to do something practical, especially during that time after the pandemic, and us all being on the computer. It felt nice to paint the wall. Through being at set and contacts at set, we did a couple of design and build pop-up projects. So a festival with some friends. We did another pop-up project for a tech refurb startup. This was a really difficult experience, but also a really good experience, because I haven't really built anything like this, and I didn't really make many models when I was at university. But I learned a lot, and how to problem solve, maybe manage people, which was good. Last year we worked on a design with Strom Architects for this mental health day centre facility in Suffolk. And we worked on a lot of things which might not seem that exciting, like approaches from the car park to the main building. And it framed it really interesting for me, because if you're suffering from mental health issues, actually that journey is pivotal to getting help, and landscape design is so important to softening that and making it more accessible. So starting to learn a little bit about designing with accessibility in that way. When we were set in Woolwich, they asked us to help design their garden. They wanted to make a community garden which integrated artists, new artists, and local people from the community. My colleagues were part of the design process. This and the artists, that's very arty. I came in more towards the end of this, when we started to think about how are we going to program this space, how are we going to activate it and actually bring in community. So I worked with SET to create a costed arts program with resident artists at SET, and how we can come up with a program of classes and workshops which draw on nature and creativity. Ended up writing a lot of funding bids, sending a lot of things to developers who are owning big parts of Woolwich. Fundraising is a whole new thing within landscape architecture. At the same time, I worked with a school in East London, School 360, and a group called the Visionaries, and they give young people growing up in urban environments experience of like rural spaces, beautiful landscapes. They take them outside of the city, and I think they have camps in places like Wales and the Peak District. So yeah, I helped deliver a co-design session with some primary school students, which was really fun, for their new grief garden that they were trying to create. I think all this work with the Business of the Sandwich Club started to help figure out where we might sit in the market. You know, we are not going to build these spaces, but we want to bring in local people who can help deliver. We want to work with local artists, but also I think what's really important about designing architecture, landscape, gardens is what happens after we leave, and how do we ensure that they are programmed and used to make sure that they don't just get left. So I think that there's a step in this process of creating or bringing in local businesses to help manage that space. I, at the same time, started working for art project. I think it was a national lottery funded project called Feeding the Creek, run by Rabel Charters, who we had done our Lloyd's Wharf doc design for. So I worked as a engagement coordinator, and the project was about researching the history of Deptford Creek, the legacy of colonialism and slave trade, and working with ecologists and looking at the future of Deptford. So it was very much about reflecting and looking forward. I helped organise trips and reached out to local stakeholders. We worked with between the National Maritime Museum, Rabel Charters, and then local poet Bernadette Russell, and a youth theatre coordinator Paul Ainsworth. And the project was supported by the Borough of Culture, which at the time was Lewis. And yeah, it culminated in a group of young people, local young people to Deptford, and actors forming this play that Bernadette wrote, which was about history and ecology and future aspirations of Deptford Creek on the Cutty Sark. It's amazing. So in the background of everything, in spring 2021, when I was doing all these different things running around, got some very difficult news. My dad had been diagnosed with a aggressive brain tumor. So by the beginning of 2022, I actually stopped working completely and started full-time caring for my mum. And he died in April 2022. So I had a few months off decompressing, went to France and, you know, chilled out. But then I started also applying for jobs. And I applied for Meanwhile Space. Meanwhile Space takes unused spaces and buildings across the urban environment, and we try and, which have been underused, and try and give them productive use. So whether that's building local workspace, creative spaces, studios, retail units, a cafe, a community garden. There's a fair amount of community engagement which goes in before we find what we want to do in those spaces. And it's often on a meanwhile time schedule. So around 5 years is the amount of time that we're on the certain place. Yeah, we also operate some of these buildings. So here we've got Avery Edge in Victoria, the Hive, Rubber Hive, and LJ Works in Loughborough Junction, Brixton area. We give tenants who rent with us affordable rent and quite flexible lease terms. And the idea is for local people to be able to fail if they want to, if you know, they can fly or they fail, you know, and it gives them an easy way to move if it's not working, essentially. So email space is great. They are very flexible and encouraging of creative projects outside work, which was wonderful because in May the Sandwich Club did another competition in Brixton, which was a London Design Festival competition about Brixton, and it's called Brixton Commons. We designed a series of design interventions which happened throughout central Brixton, and they would host creative workshops throughout the month of June, and then afterwards they would move to LJ Works and sort of uni supply for that. We brought in local people to talk about their history and their experience of living in Brixton. And that was great. We were shortlisted, but we didn't win. But it was really great, actually. And I think we are applying for arts funding to try and do it. So back to the Hive. So the Hive is kind of a bit like my baby at the moment. It's designed by IFDU architects, and it's a demountable building. After 10 years, it will move on somewhere else. Rubber Hive's in Suffolk, by the way. And it's land owned by TfL. We lease the land to TfL. And yeah, the first sort of thing that I was given to do when I came to Remodel Space was design a community garden. I was like, oh, perfect. It's great. So there are a few constraints for my garden, e-garden. So it is demountable. It will move in 9 years. There was absolutely no budget. It overlooks the Rubber Hive tunnel and Rubber Hive overground. Got overground here, Rubber Hive tunnel here, 20-metre drop. And obviously it's very polluted from both those tunnels. And nothing can be within a metre of water as well, because TfL needs to have access to time. So all these all these constraints were challenges, but I think useful because they gave, I don't know, opportunity to be creative. Let's just say that. So I started applying for funding, public funding. The first lot was to create a community program to bring in people to do creative workshops, nature workshops, and yeah, that's a huge part of my job now. Is and yeah, so we got one pot of funding to support that. Our second pot of funding, which was for the capital works, which yeah, constraints were quite difficult, but a few years ago when I was still studying at Greenwich, my friend Emma, who's from Global Generation, we went to a permaculture course, and we learned about Google Mounds. Big up Google Mounds. In German, they translate to hill, so they are hill mounds. And at the Paper Garden, where she works, they had a really successfully incorporated this into their community garden because they are next to the Teddy building, and it's all concrete floored, and they build up from there. So I was like, oh, maybe there's something we could do. They're layers of logs, and then like vegetation, grass, and leaves, and then topsoil on top, and then you plant into them. And as the logs break down, the vegetation breaks down, it and it feeds plants. It heats up, and it just keeps it really healthy and drought resistant as well, which is a huge thing, like for a garden in South London. So this is this was taken maybe like last week, and yeah, it's been a process of recruiting local people, because part of the feedback when the hive was built was they wanted a community garden. Like that was one of the things that we needed to deliver. But I think there's a difference between people saying they want something and then people feeling like they can access a space and should access a space. And also people that maybe have a garden or don't have a garden, like it's scary. We are working with, so the way that the program is set up is I'm recruiting local volunteers who come garden every Saturday and build. We are working with Southwark Social Subscribing Hub to set up a session monthly for people to come in and garden. And we also work with our primary school neighbour, Albion Primary School, and they will be coming in with their early years to do bi-monthly sessions in the garden. So the next stage of the hive garden is we are building a pergola, which I'm really excited about. So the nice thing about the hive is that it is tenanted by local charities and local creatives. So part of our program of creative workshops, I like bringing in the tenants to host them and put on their own and like come up with ideas of how we can work with the community, bring them in, or they can help with the design of the garden. So Mark and Daniel from Unfold Architects, they've designed this pergola, which is made of old material from a project, another meanwhile space project, which you can see here. In one of the arches in Loughborough Junction, which unfortunately didn't pass building regs, so had to be dismantled. And I think some of it's gone to UAL Camberwell, some of it's pergola. My colleague at Meanwhile Space came up with this lovely co-design workshop of coming up with words and expressions of what Rubber Hive means to local people, and here we are painting and weatherproofing, and yeah, it's kind of my job, which is very strange. So yeah, I've just kind of given you a history of me, but I think all of this is context to like what I think I'm excited about for the future of like these small projects, and like the overlap of creative space, community space and garden space. And I think there's a distinction to be made between green and garden space, because green space can be inactive. I think that garden space implies people are being brought in to actively create that together, co-design together. I think, yeah, making the use of like small, tactical, challenging sites, like how Meanwhile Space works, it's a really interesting model. I think the thing about these sites is that they are not going to feed a community, and they're not going to solve the climate crisis, but they are powerful. They create opportunities for education. They provide a creative third space where people, you know, outside of work, outside of the home, can find a place to, I don't know, like form identity or create identity and find new friends and learn new skills. And I think that that's very important on a neighbourhood level. I'm thinking a lot at the moment about the future of this and how it can be packaged as a product, really, to be sold, in a sense, to developers and people with money, I know that Mima Space, we're looking a lot at social value and how that can be translated to GDP. I know similar calculations are done for like green space and trees. And, you know, if we're living in a capitalist society, how do we make use of what we're doing? Because people are interested in it. Developers, Section 106, you know, but I think it goes beyond that. Housing associations, local authorities, you know, make a place desirable without getting rid of the people living there. How do you do that? I don't know. I feel like gardening's a great way. So yeah, I think that's sort of my journey through landscape and my own thoughts. And yeah, I guess I find community gardens really interesting because I still feel like they're not really, are they part of landscape architecture? Are they treated the same way? They're not a park. They don't have that big scale, but there's so many different skills and, you know, whether it's human empathy or whether it's fundraising or, I don't know, learning how to build something that is so, like, important. So yeah, that's me.
Rosie, fantastic presentation, amazing knowledge and richness and what you shared with us. Will you please join me in thanking Rosie?